Alright guys, any way you slice it, this Honda CBR 1000 RRR SP Fireblade is a very expensive motorcycle. Not even just for Hondas, which are notoriously expensive. This bike will run you $30,000 out on the showroom floor after tax, title, and license, and all that stuff. So today we're going to figure out why the hell does this bike cost so much money? Stick around. Now, as many of you guys know, this is one of our giveaway bikes. I actually purchased this motorcycle cash money. Yes, cut the check myself, but I didn't pay 30 grand for this bike. I paid about $27,800 for this machine, thanks to the good folks over at Ride Now Austin. They're our preferred dealership here in the Austin area. I've bought like 20 plus bikes from them. They always give me good service and good prices too. Now, I can't promise you they'll sell you a Fireblade for that cheap, but I can promise you they'll give you great service and a great price as well. If you're local in the area, hit the links down below and go to Ride Now Austin to get your next motorcycle. Now, let's start at the most eye-wateringly expensive place on this bike, and it's the engine. Alright guys, in our review of this motorcycle, we had a lot of butthurt comments of people saying that this is not, in fact, the GP bike because they have large brains and they said that one's a V4 and this one's an inline 4, so it's impossible for them to be the same. But it features a lot of derivations from the GP engine, being bore and stroke the main one, and Honda even says it on their website. Andrew, please, just snip right here where Honda says it's based on the GP bike. But you have a little more info on the engine, right?
Yeah, so it would technically be more accurate to say that this is the world Superbike bike with lights.
Yeah.
I mean, that's literally what it was designed to compete in, is world Superbike. But don't let that fool you. It still has a ton of GP technology in here. This is the epitome of trickle-down tech right here. Inside this engine, you have the same bore and stroke as the GP bike. So it's basically dinner plate sized heads on this motorcycle that are going up and down just a little bit. It's so over square, and that's designed to increase torque, but that's an expensive thing to do, especially when you have to consider the connecting rods that are holding that to the crankshaft. Those have been reinforced and they're beefed up on this motorcycle so that they can withstand all of the horsepower. You gotta remember that even though this one is the American version that is a little bit limited, this bike is capable of hitting 215 horsepower, which is a ton of stress to put on an engine.
Yeah, which we are definitely going to get a nice little ECU flash, dyno tune this bad boy, and probably put a full system because I want to get 210 at the wheel, no doubt.
We've also got stuff in here that's crazy lightweight. So for example, the cam chain has been reduced in weight. You wouldn't think of, well, that's a big piece of engine stuff. Well, it actually weighs quite a bit, and in here, they've slimmed it down enough so that it's a significant enough thing for them to sell it on. They've also got narrower valves. They've got a lighter stator. Everything in this engine is designed to be as lightweight as humanly possible and still put down as much power reliably as they can.
Yeah, it's kind of nuts we live in a world where you can just get a 200 plus horsepower motorcycle with a factory warranty. A generation ago, even 10 years ago, that was almost unthinkable. These were like literally race bike numbers that you can just go out and get now. And you guys have to remember too, all these rotating components, whenever you have something that rotates, the lighter it is, the more added benefit you get of it being lighter, right? Because if you have a crankshaft that's lighter, you have a cam chain that's lighter, all that stuff rotates and spins around and creates less inertia, meaning this engine is more nimble side to side whenever you're riding the bike. But we have to talk about the next pricey component on this bike, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's got to do with this whole situation.
Alright guys, next up, without a doubt, the most expensive component that adds price to this motorcycle is the suspension. Now, when you look at something like a Gixxer 250, you've got tiny, non-adjustable front suspension, and non-adjustable rear suspension as well. Working your way up from there, you start to get into adjustable suspension, maybe a top shelf Showa or something like that. Then, as everyone knows, Öhlins is kind of like the name brand, the A tier, S tier kind of suspension. And then on top of that, this is an electronically adjustable Öhlins suspension. So that's gonna add a ton of cost to this motorcycle, right, Spite?
Absolutely. So not only are these electronically adjustable, but they are the top, tippy top tier Öhlins. You've got yourself these remote reservoirs down here charged with nitrogen, which normally you see on shocks, but up front on the forks, you only get that on absolute top tier setups. Looking up here at the triple clamp, you can see how the electronics are all dialed in to adjust this motorcycle on the fly, basically.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's all the same back here on the shock. It's still electronically adjustable. It's not just like, this is your fancy setup. It's fancy front and back.
Yeah.
And then connecting these two things is basically a work of art in terms of this frame.
Yeah, this frame is truly world-class type of stuff. Huge and beefy, dialed in to the most rigorous and specific demands of racing, and superbike racing specifically. It's a twin spar, full superbike frame here. And then we gotta talk about that swing arm as well. I mean, look at all the welds, right? Like, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, you can really tell just by looking at it how it's bespoke to this motorcycle. It was designed and built to the nth degree, and it's not just one milled thing out of just a giant aluminum block. They milled each individual piece and then welded them together to make it as light as humanly possible. I mean, this is the most rigid frame Honda's ever put in one of their street leader bikes, and it's basically because it's not a street bike.
Yeah.
This is designed to withstand nothing but top speed, heavy braking, hard turning, all of that good stuff without flexing or cracking.
Yeah, and the best part is too, you know, Honda has so much racing experience that they actually design a small amount of flex into their frames. They think about their swing arms, not only just from the pivot points, but also what it's gonna do on the side of the tire, because as fancy as this Olin suspension is, once a motorcycle is leaned over, your suspension's not even doing anything anymore. You gotta focus really on the frame and the swing arm to help you get feel out of the bike when you're on the side of the tire. It's really only when you pick it up out of corners and dive into corners that suspension's gonna help keep you dialed in. But yeah, these Olins are definitely up to the task, that's for sure.
And I think the next most important thing to talk about is, we've talked about going, we've talked about turning, we gotta talk about stopping.
Yep. All right guys, as you would expect, the CBR also has some top shelf braking components on it as well. This is a 330 mil rotor, which is gigantic. And on top of that, this is a custom fit rotor as well. As you can see, it steps down here to actually mount to the wheel. You don't see that often. Normally they're just nice and flush. On top of that, you've got top of the line Brembo Stylema calipers here. This is a monoblock caliper, literally one of the top end braking components you could possibly have on a motorcycle. And short of a carbon brake, which wouldn't work really well on the street anyways, this is about as good as it's gonna get for your top of the line leader bikes, but it doesn't end there.
So all those fancy rotors and calipers down there are awesome, but they wouldn't mean anything if you couldn't actually move fluid down there. And this master cylinder right here is about the most efficient way you're gonna get fluid from the top of the bike down to your calipers. This thing has one of the best feels on a stock motorcycle you're ever going to feel. Chances are, if you're watching this video at home, you've got yourself a Nissan set of calipers, maybe you have a Nissan master cylinder, maybe you've got something a little bit nicer like on a leader bike from maybe a couple years ago, but you get this feel on there and it just cannot be beat. Stock for stock, this thing is the best master cylinder you're going to find on a motorcycle. You gotta go to the aftermarket to beat this thing. Now, all of this stuff, the engine, the brakes, the suspension, they're all controlled by essentially the brain of Skynet within this motorcycle. Let's talk about this tech package.
One of the other reasons this bike is so dang expensive is the crazy electronics package this thing comes with. This is seriously like World Superbike grade stuff because, well, it competes in World Superbike. Everything is adjustable on this motorcycle. The suspension, the engine braking, the quick shifter can be adjusted, the brake feel. I mean, every little parameter you can possibly think of on this machine can be adjusted to your liking. So if you like to fiddle with your little adjusters and your settings on your motorcycle, this is the thing for you. But be warned, although this TFT is beautiful, it is quite difficult to navigate. Here's a clip of us fiddling with this thing. Look at this shit. That's so fucking crazy. I only needed over 5,000.
Here, let me pull up my graph.
What's your objective? All that to say, when your motorcycle has a supercomputer on board, that's gonna add to the overall cost of your machine. Now the last thing that makes this bike so expensive is actually this exhaust right here. This is an Akrapovic fitted from the factory. You don't see that often. That's just another thing that makes this thing so special. It's got full titanium headers, which a bike like this is gonna have to have. It actually has a butterfly valve as well that's controlled by, guess what, the electronics at 8,000 RPM to open up and give you even more outlet of air and exhaust coming out of the back of the engine here. This is a really, really cool piece and a nice feature, and it kind of fits this bike's whole ethos as well. And it's also got an HRC sticker, so that's gonna add up the price as well. Now let's round out this video. So we've talked about all the crazy, amazing things that makes this motorcycle so special and worth the price tag, but there's a couple weird things about it too, right, Spike? Something you're clocking that's a little odd?
Yeah, so we talked a lot about the quality of the braking system on this motorcycle, the stylemas, the big rotors, the massive master cylinder, but connecting the two are rubber lines for some reason.
Can't explain that.
Normally you would want to see steel.
Yeah.
I got to imagine that somebody in the Honda factory like ran the numbers and put a rubber line on here because it performed better, but I can't imagine that's what happened.
Yeah.
But honestly, how much does a steel line on this motorcycle actually add? Like $100?
I don't know, but I have it on good authority from none other than Zach Kortz in an article he wrote that the brakes were not a problem and did not fade. And if Zach Kortz couldn't get them to fade, I sure as hell am not going to get them to fade. So there's that. I also found that the bolts holding some of the engine together, they're not titanium. They're just regular bolts, right? We put a little magnet and they stuck. Weird.
Yeah.
The R1 had titanium bolts literally everywhere. So why doesn't the Honda, right?
Again, I got to imagine that some number cruncher ran the numbers and figured that they had more strength per weight or whatever, or they managed to save enough weight somewhere else to overcome the weight of the steel bolts. But I mean, when you're chasing times like this motorcycle is meant to, even a couple of ounces here and there can change how the motorcycle performs.
Definitely. And yeah, I would say that, you know, the bean counters of Honda definitely figured something out. And I do think this motorcycle is worth the price tag. But with that being said, Spite, we've covered all the amazing things on this bike. What's your favorite part about it? What's your favorite detail or thing?
Honestly, this motorcycle would not be as impressive to me without the paint scheme and the plastics that they've wrapped this motorcycle in. This thing is drop dead gorgeous. You can recognize it from a mile away. I love how subtle the winglets are, even though they still exist. Everybody loves to have their winglets on their fancy, you know, homologated race bike. So having them on here in not a completely over-the-top way is nice. The blue on this motorcycle, guys, you have to see it in person to really see how much it shines.
Yeah.
It's incredible to look at.
This thing has serious road presence. The video where Spite was riding it around, I looked in the rear mirror and I just, seeing the bike just going down the road is just unbelievable.
Yeah.
For me, my favorite detail has to be the triple clamp here. I know it's a small one, but I love the shape of it. I love that it's blacked out. It's one of the biggest things you see when you're riding the bike when you look down. I love how thin it is. It's just such a beautiful triple clamp. And honestly, not a lot of manufacturers pay attention to stuff like that. You look at an R1, it has a very kind of boilerplate standard triple clamp, and that's why I like my Daytona so much as well. It's got a cool cutout in the triple clamp and just a nice feature to have on the bike. Yeah, this is an amazing motorcycle, guys. But for $30,000, I said I think it's worth it. Do you think it's worth it?
Man, $30,000 buys you a lot of bikes, plural, with an S.
Yeah.
You could get so much for 30 grand. For me, this would not be where I would spend my 30 grand. I would separate it probably between a really nice hyper naked for the street, a nice dirt bike, and then some goof around supermoto or something like that.
Yeah.
But I can totally understand why somebody would want to go get this motorcycle. Not only because it is a massive flex, but because it is literally the best of the best out there right now.
Yeah. Yeah, personally, I would probably get a well-sorted, lightly used R1 and then have a ton of strip club money left over, right? But I think that this bike, if you're looking for the most premium and awesome Japanese motorcycling experience, if you're a big Honda fan, you can't go wrong with something like this. So with that, guys, we're gonna wrap up today's video. I hope you enjoyed taking a look at everything that makes the Honda Fireblade so special and worth the $30,000 price point that it commands. Thanks again to Ride Now Austin for getting this bike over to us. It was great to purchase from them, and we will be back more times to purchase from them. Remember, we're giving this Fireblade away. Hit the link down below to yammie.co. Become a member, join up, and get your entries to win this motorcycle. We'll catch you in the next one. See you later. Now, how you doing, partner? This video's over, but you click on this one right over here. You keep watching yourself some Yammie Noob. Maybe I bend my boost on this one. Maybe I'll give you some other funny memes or something like that. You might not know if you watch the video, so watch the video now, all right?